In the Australian Jesuit province, we have quite a few agencies and people working with refugees and asylum seekers. For some time now, they've been suggesting to me that it would be good if the Australian Jesuit province, as a province, was to say something about the situation of refugees and asylum seekers, especially given that both political parties are competing with one another to make harsher and harsher policies, which we think have become quite unethical. Look, I think the current way we're dealing with refugees and asylum seekers doesn't take account of the situation of the world. We live in a world of crushing poverty and bloody persecution in so many parts of our world. The vast majority of the people of our world, our brothers and sisters, don't live as we do. We have to have some share in their suffering and their struggle. And perhaps this is the way that we are being called to stand in solidarity with people from all over the world who don't enjoy the human rights standards and the standards of living that we enjoy. That means that we do have the capacity to welcome refugees and asylum seekers and treat them with dignity. I think it's like a neighbour. If a neighbour of yours, a little child from down the street, ran up to your front door, knocked on the door, told you they were frightened of somebody and asked you to help them, of course you'd help them. You'd take them in, you'd look after them, you'd get them protection, you'd call the police. That's what we have to do with refugees and asylum seekers. If they are fleeing persecution and asking us for protection, we have an obligation to protect them. So I think that's important to remember. This is about protection of people fleeing in fear of their lives. Most people in the world don't share our standard of living and the quality of our legal systems and the quality of our civil society that respects people's rights and protects their rights. So it does beg the question for us, how do we stand in solidarity with people from all over the world who live with terrible poverty and terrible violence? And it does actually invite us to really put ourselves out, to actually give until it hurts. And the fact that our care for people arriving by boat is hurting, is that necessarily a bad thing? It's a sign of our solidarity with people from the rest of the world who are hurting, whose lives are quite terrible. So it is going to cost us something to do the right thing. It's in some cases it's going to cost us quite a lot. It's going to cost us a lot of money. It's also going to cost us a lot in terms of compassion and human kindness and solidarity. But I think we've got it in us to do it. I think we can respond in a generous and compassionate way. Look, one of the points made by Pope Francis on his visit to Lampedusa was that people have become indifferent. And I think in Australia we're being encouraged to become indifferent. We're told we have to be tough on refugees and asylum seekers. Australians are not naturally hard and cruel, so to be tough, we have to become more indifferent. We have to tell ourselves that we have to be tough and that we shouldn't be seeing these people as real human beings just like us, who weep like us, who bleed like us, who cry like us, who mourn like us, and who die like us. We're tending not to think of them as people. We're thinking of them as numbers or as problems or as strangers, but not as people just like us. I think that's a big part of the problem, and I think the challenge for us is to, as the Pope said on Lampedusa, weep for these people. When we see that little white coffin being carried off the plane to be buried here on the Australian mainland, and we see the weeping mother inconsolable, we should be able to identify with her, to weep with her, to share her pain and recognise her humanity and her grief. And that's the challenge for us. If we do that, I think we will come up with much better, more compassionate and more just policies.